The restaurant was the kind of place people didn't just eat at, they performed at it. Low amber lighting washed over polished marble floors, and the air carried the carefully engineered scent of truffle oil, citrus cleanser, and quiet money. Conversations never rose above a controlled murmur. Laughter was measured. Even confidence here had etiquette. This was where hedge fund partners celebrated quiet wins, where city officials met donors without being photographed, where men who owned half the block pretended they only owned a fork and a napkin. Everyone inside believed they belonged. Some of them were right. Most of them were renting the illusion. At the entrance, a hostess scanned faces the way customs agents scan passports. She nodded to familiar patrons before they even spoke. A subtle hierarchy moved through the room like an invisible current. Who was greeted by name, who was offered the best table, who was told there would be a short wait even when half the room was empty. When the woman walked in alone, no one looked twice. She didn't announce herself. She didn't pause to take in the room. She didn't wear a coat worth more than a month's rent or jewelry that caught the light. No diamond earrings. No watch. No rings. Her dress was simple, dark, perfectly tailored but intentionally unremarkable. The kind of outfit designed to disappear in a room full of peacocks. The hostess smiled politely, the kind of smile reserved for people who wouldn't cause trouble, but also wouldn't tip excessively. "Just one?" she asked. "Yes," the woman replied, voice calm, neutral, almost gentle. She was led to a table near the edge of the dining room, not the worst seat but not one of the prize center tables either. A safe choice, a forgettable one, the kind of table you give to someone who isn't expected to stay long. She sat, folded her napkin neatly in her lap, and glanced around with quiet precision. Not curiosity, assessment. She noticed the exits, the mirrors placed too strategically to be decorative. The man in the corner booth who hadn't touched his drink. The way two different waiters deferred to a single manager even when he wasn't speaking. She noticed who acted important, and who didn't need to. The waiter assigned to her table arrived already irritated. It had been a bad night, a double shift, a fight with his girlfriend that morning that ended with her telling him he was going nowhere. A table earlier had complained about the temperature of their soup, and the manager had sided with them. Tips were light, patience was thinner. When he saw her sitting alone, plain, quiet, not looking at her phone, something in him relaxed. Easy table, he thought. Low maintenance. Low expectations. "What can I get you?" he asked, not rude enough to be reportable, but not warm enough to be kind. She looked up at him and smiled. Not the ingratiating kind, just polite. "I'd like to start with a glass of red wine, please." He didn't write it down. "What kind?" She glanced at the wine list, already knowing the answer. "The Barolo, if you have it by the glass." He paused, then let out a small breath through his nose. "That one's usually ordered by the bottle," he said. "I know," she replied softly, "but I'd just like a glass." He tilted his head slightly, scanning her outfit again, as if double-checking his earlier assumption. "I'll see what I can do," he said, already turning away. She thanked him. He didn't respond. 10 minutes passed. Around her, plates arrived. Glasses were refilled. A couple at a nearby table laughed loudly at something on a phone screen. A server walked past her table twice without stopping. She sat patiently, hands folded, posture relaxed. She wasn't waiting in the way people usually waited. No checking the time. No restless shifting. No irritation leaking through the cracks. When the waiter finally returned, he carried a different wine. "This is our house red," he said, setting it down without ceremony. "The Barolo isn't available by the glass." She glanced at the label, then up at him. "I see," she said. "That's fine. Thank you for checking." He nodded, already halfway gone, surprised and faintly annoyed that she hadn't pushed back. She took a sip, let the taste settle. It wasn't what she ordered, but she didn't react. A few minutes later, she flagged him gently as he passed. "Excuse me," she said. He stopped, impatience flickering across his face. "Yes. When you have a moment, I'd like to order." He looked at the room, at his other tables, at the manager. "I'll be right back," he said. He wasn't. Another 10 minutes slipped by, then 15. When he returned, he didn't apologize. "What'll it be?" he asked. She ordered calmly. Nothing extravagant. Nothing cheap. Perfectly reasonable. He interrupted halfway through. "We're out of that." She adjusted smoothly. "That'll take a while," he said. She paused, then nodded. "That's all right." He stared at her for a beat, thrown off by how little resistance she offered, then scribbled something down and walked away. Each delay was small, defensible. Nothing a manager would reprimand. Nothing she could easily complain about without sounding petty. And she never raised her voice, never sighed, never showed irritation. Each time he passed, she thanked him. Each time it made him more uncomfortable. There's a specific kind of power that comes from being able to affect someone without consequence. He felt it growing. He corrected her pronunciation when she asked a question about the menu. He commented lightly, almost joking, that a certain dish was pretty rich and not for everyone. She smiled and chose it anyway. When the food finally arrived, it wasn't what she ordered. She looked at the plate, then up at him. "I believe this was meant to be That's what the kitchen sent," he said quickly. "They're slammed." She studied him for a moment, not accusing, not offended. "All right," she said. "Thank you." He walked away feeling oddly unsettled. He wanted her to react, to complain, to validate the little narrative in his head that she was difficult or demanding or out of her depth. Instead, she dismantled it by being unfailingly gracious. Other diners had started to notice now. Not her exactly, but the pattern, the repeated stops, the way he spoke to her versus how he spoke to others. A woman at a nearby table frowned slightly. A man glanced over, then back to his drink. The woman ate slowly, deliberately. She seemed unbothered by the delays, the wrong order, the tone, as if time bent differently around her. When the waiter returned to clear her plate, he finally cracked. "You know," he said casually, stacking dishes, "this place might not be what you're used to. It can get expensive." She met his eyes. "I'm aware," she said. He waited for something. Embarrassment, defensiveness, apology. None came. She reached for her glass, took another sip, then set it down. "You've done very well tonight," she said. It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't praise. It was an observation. He laughed under his breath. "Sure," he said. "Anything else?" She shook her head. "Just the check, please." He dropped it without looking at her, already turning away. When she stood to leave, she placed cash on the table. Not neatly stacked, just enough to be obvious. As she stepped away, she paused. "Excuse me," she said gently. He turned, irritation ready. "Yes." She smiled, small, composed, almost kind. "How long have you worked here?" The question didn't fit. It wasn't about the food, or the bill, or the service. It landed oddly, like a door opening where a wall should have been. He blinked. "Why?" he asked. She held his gaze unblinking. "No reason," she said. "I was just curious." Then she walked toward the exit, leaving him standing there with a question he didn't yet understand, and a room that suddenly felt much quieter than it had moments before. The shift in the room didn't happen all at once. It crept in the way unease always does, quietly, politely, with plausible deniability. The waiter returned to her table with a stiffness in his shoulders, a performance of professionalism stretched thin over irritation. He didn't look at her when he spoke. He spoke at her. "Just so you know," he said, setting down a fresh plate she hadn't asked for. "The kitchen recommends this for first-timers. It's lighter, easier." She looked at the dish, then at him. "I didn't order this," she said. He waved a hand, already halfway turned toward the neighboring table. "Trust me. It's better for where you're at." The words landed oddly, not loud, not overtly cruel, but weighted, deliberate. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't bristle. "I see," she said. He paused, clearly expecting more. An argument. Correction. Something to push against. Instead, she thanked him. That seemed to irritate him more than anything else could have. When she asked, calmly, if the dish she'd originally ordered might still be prepared, he cut her off mid-sentence. "That's a long wait," he said loudly enough for the table beside her to hear. "Those plates take time. You don't want to be here all night." A man 2 tables over snorted into his drink. A woman leaned closer to her companion, whispering with a smirk. The waiter noticed. His spine straightened. "Well?" he said. She nodded once. "That's all right." The control in her voice made him feel foolish, like he was arguing with someone who wasn't even in the same room. So he escalated. He corrected her pronunciation when she asked about a sauce, doing it loudly, theatrically, as if instructing a child. He explained the menu to her as if she'd never eaten outside her neighborhood. When she asked for water without ice, he replied, "We usually serve it the standard way, before bringing it iced anyway." Each interaction was small, each one plausible. Together, they formed a pattern sharp enough to cut. Around them, attention gathered. Not all eyes were amused. Some were curious. A few were uncomfortable. One older man near the bar had stopped talking altogether. His gaze fixed on the woman with something like recognition tightening his jaw. She noticed all of it. She noticed who laughed openly, enjoying the spectacle. She noticed who raised their phones, pretending to text while angling the camera just enough. She noticed who looked away, not embarrassed, but relieved it wasn't them. She noticed the manager hovering at the edge of the room, watching but not intervening. The waiter leaned into it now. He suggested simpler wine options when she declined a refill. He commented on portion sizes. He joked loudly about how people sometimes ordered with their eyes instead of their wallets. When she met his gaze, it wasn't with anger. It was with attention. The kind that makes people feel seen in ways they don't like. "You don't need to rush me," she said at one point, voice even. "I'm not in a hurry." "Well, other people are," he replied, glancing pointedly at his section. She followed his gaze calmly, then looked back at him. "Of course," she said. That was when someone laughed too loudly. A sharp, performative sound meant to signal alignment. Another phone came out. Someone whispered, "This is awkward." With a grin, the waiter felt buoyed by the room, by the permission, by the subtle nods that told him he was winning something, even if he wasn't sure what. "You know," he said, clearing plates she hadn't finished, "we have places down the street that might be more your speed, less formal." The implication hung there. She placed her napkin neatly on the table. "Thank you for the suggestion," she said. He sighed, exaggerated. "I'm just trying to help." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you?" A beat passed. Just one. Something flickered behind his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, but he smothered it. "I'll get the manager," he said abruptly. "This doesn't seem like it's working out." The room went still. A few people leaned forward. Someone murmured, "Oh." The woman didn't move. "There's no need for that," she said. "I'm comfortable." He smiled thinly. "I'm not." He returned a moment later with a dish, steaming, aromatic, and dropped it onto her table with a little too much force. Sauce splashed onto the pristine cloth. "This is what you ordered," he said. "It wasn't." She looked at the mess, at the plate, at the sauce creeping toward her sleeve. Then she looked up at him. The silence spread outward like a held breath. "I think there's been a mistake," she said. He crossed his arms. "That's what the kitchen sent." A phone camera clicked. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" The woman reached for her napkin and dabbed the edge of the tablecloth, careful, precise. "It's all right," she said. "These things happen." The waiter let out a laugh, short, disbelieving. "Look," he said louder now. "I've got real customers to take care of. If this isn't working for you, I can call security and we can wrap this up." No one laughed this time. The word security sat heavy in the air. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Thick, plain, no markings. She placed it on the table slowly, deliberately, so that anyone watching could see it clearly. Then she stood. The waiter looked at the envelope, then at her. "What's that?" he asked. She smiled, soft, composed, unreadable. "A tip," she said. She stepped past him without another word and walked toward the exit, leaving behind a table gone quiet, a room full of eyes, and a waiter staring at an envelope that suddenly felt much heavier than it looked. The envelope sat where she'd left it, thick and quiet, like a dare no one wanted to accept. For a few seconds after she walked away, the room didn't move. Forks hovered midair. Conversations stalled halfway through sentences. Even the music seemed to fade into something thinner, less confident. The waiter stared at the envelope. He didn't touch it at first. He let out a short laugh, the kind that comes automatically when something feels off but you don't yet know why. "Unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. He picked it up, thumbed the edge, felt the weight. His smile tightened. He glanced around, half expecting someone to be watching him closely, but most people had already turned back to their tables, pretending nothing strange had happened. A few phones slipped back into pockets. A few eyes lingered longer than they should have. He slid the envelope open just enough to see inside. The smile vanished, not because of how much cash was there, though it was more than he'd expected. Enough to make his breath hitch. Enough to make him feel briefly triumphant. But because of how it was folded. Precise. Intentional. Like it hadn't been thrown together or pulled from an ATM 5 minutes earlier. He stuffed it into his apron, heart beating faster now, and turned toward the kitchen. That was when he noticed the manager. The man stood near the service station, color draining from his face in stages. Not panic yet, something colder. His eyes tracked the woman's path to the door, then flicked to the table she'd vacated, then to the waiter. Their eyes met. The manager's mouth opened, then closed. He looked away quickly, as if he'd seen something he wasn't supposed to. In the kitchen, whispers had started. Low, fast, sharp. A line cook leaned toward another, speaking out of the side of his mouth. Someone stopped plating a dish halfway through. A dishwasher paused, hands still submerged, listening. The waiter pushed through the swinging doors. "What?" he snapped. "Why's everyone staring?" No one answered him right away. The sous chef glanced toward the dining room, then back at him. "Who was that woman?" He scoffed. "Just some lady who didn't like the menu." The sous chef didn't smile. The manager appeared behind him, moving faster than usual, his voice pitched low but tight. "Did you say anything unusual?" he asked. The waiter frowned. "What do you mean?" The manager swallowed. His gaze drifted to the apron, to the envelope bulge. "Did you say anything?" he repeated. "That could be taken the wrong way?" The waiter laughed again, louder this time, trying to force the moment back into something familiar. "Relax," he said. "She was sensitive. That's all." The manager stared at him like he'd just spoken another language. In the dining room, a man in an expensive jacket stood slowly from his table. He adjusted his cuffs, glanced around once, then spoke. Not loudly, but clearly enough that nearby tables heard him. "I think," he said, "we should all take a moment." The room quieted. He turned toward the door the woman had exited through, then back to the room. "I'd like to apologize," he said, "for what just occurred." A ripple of confusion spread. The waiter stepped back into the room just in time to hear it. "Apologize?" The man continued, eyes sweeping the space, never settling on the waiter directly. "Some of us seem to have forgotten where we are," he said, "and who this establishment ultimately serves." A woman near the bar stiffened. Someone else cleared their throat. The waiter laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the tension. "Is this a joke?" he said. No one laughed with him. The manager moved quickly now, almost running, murmuring something to the man, who nodded once, curtly. Another patron stood. Then another. Subtle movements. Chairs scraping softly. People repositioning themselves without knowing why. The waiter's smile faltered. "What's going on?" he asked. The manager grabbed his arm. Not hard, but urgently, and pulled him aside. "Do you have any idea who that was?" he whispered. The waiter shook his head, annoyed. "Does it matter?" The manager's face went pale. Behind them, someone muttered a name, not loud enough to be certain, but the sound of it moved through the room like electricity. A few heads snapped up. A few people froze entirely. The waiter didn't hear the name. He heard the silence that followed it. He felt suddenly exposed, like the room had tilted and he was the only one still standing upright. "This is ridiculous," he said, too loudly. "She left." The manager didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the door, because the door had opened again. The woman stepped back inside. She moved at the same unhurried pace as before. Same posture, same calm, as if she'd never left at all. The room went completely still. She walked back to her table and sat down. No one spoke. The waiter stared, his mouth opening slightly. Laughter caught halfway in his throat as the reality he'd been avoiding finally began to crack. She sat the same way she had before, back straight, hands folded loosely on the table, as if nothing unusual had happened. The chair didn't scrape when she pulled it in. She didn't look around to see who was watching. She didn't need to. The room had already oriented itself toward her. The manager approached first. Not fully, just enough to hover at a respectful distance, uncertain whether to speak or wait. He glanced at the waiter once, sharply, then back at her. "I apologize," he began, voice unsteady. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." She looked up at him calmly. "Yes," she said. "There was." 2 words. Flat. Not accusatory. Not forgiving. He swallowed. May I offer you something?" "On the house." She considered this for a moment, then shook her head gently. "No," she said. "Thank you." The refusal landed harder than any demand would have. The waiter stood a few steps back, frozen. He watched the exchange, his mind scrambling to assemble meaning from fragments. The envelope, the apology, the man who'd stood up, the name, maybe a name that had passed through the room like a current. This didn't make sense. She was just a woman, alone, no entourage, no visible authority. She reached into her bag and removed a slim folder. She didn't open it. She simply placed it on the table between herself and the manager. "I believe this property is still listed under a holding company," she said conversationally. "Third-tier shell. Registered out of state." The manager's face drained of color. "Yes," he said carefully. "That's correct." She nodded. "It will be updated by morning." He didn't ask how she knew. He didn't ask what she meant. "Of course," he said. Immediately, the waiter's heart began to pound. She turned her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him. "Not fully. Not yet. You might want to sit," she said. He laughed weakly. "I'm fine." No one laughed with him. She waited. The silence stretched. Finally, he pulled out a chair and sat, movement stiff, like someone bracing for impact. She looked at him now. Really looked at him. Not with anger. With clarity. "This building," she said, "sits on land purchased 87 years ago by a company that no longer exists. The name changed 4 times. The ownership never did." She tapped the table once. Soft. "I own the land." The waiter blinked. The manager closed his eyes briefly, as if confirming something he'd already feared. She continued, voice even almost instructional. "The suppliers who deliver your meat, your produce, your wine, they operate on contracts negotiated through intermediaries. Those intermediaries report to me." A pause, letting it land. "When shipments arrive on time," she went on, "it's because I allow them to. When they don't, it's because someone forgot how the system works." The waiter's mouth opened, then closed. She leaned back slightly, folding one leg over the other. "The reason security hasn't intervened tonight," she added, "is because the company that provides it renegotiated their rates last winter, after I reminded them who insured their families. No emphasis, no threat, just sequence." A woman near the bar lowered her glass slowly, hands shaking. A man at a corner table stared at his plate, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the porcelain. The waiter felt the room slipping away from him, piece by piece. She reached into the folder now and removed a single sheet of paper. "Your name," she said, glancing down, "has come up before." His stomach dropped. 3 customer complaints, she continued. 2 were dismissed. 1 was paid out quietly. He shook his head. I don't." She raised a finger. He stopped. "Your debts," she said, eyes returning to the page, "are modest but persistent. Credit cards, personal loan, nothing unmanageable. Yet." His breath came faster. She flipped the page. "Your brother," she said almost gently, "has been unlucky." The word hung there. "Wrong friends," she went on. "Wrong nights. Wrong packages." The waiter stood abruptly, chair scraping loud in the quiet room. "Leave," the manager hissed. "Please." She lifted her hand. The manager froze. The waiter stared at her now, eyes wide, face flushed, sweat gathering at his temples. "You can't," he began. She looked up at him, calm as ever. "I can," she said. "And I am." She set the papers down neatly. "No one here," she continued, gesturing vaguely at the room, "is interested in spectacle. That was your mistake. You thought this was entertainment." She met his gaze. "This city runs on agreements," she said. "On courtesy. On knowing when to stop." The waiter's legs trembled. "I didn't know," he whispered. She nodded. "That much is clear." Silence pressed in from all sides. Even the kitchen had gone still. She folded her hands again. "So," she said, voice soft, measured, final. "Do you want this to end quietly or correctly?" The question hung in the air long after she asked it. Quietly or correctly? No one rushed to fill the silence. No one moved to help him. The room had made a decision without voting. The waiter's mouth opened, closed. He swallowed hard, eyes darting from her to the manager, to the patrons who no longer looked like an audience but like witnesses. I didn't mean," he started. She didn't interrupt. She simply waited. He took a step closer to the table, hands half raised, palms open in a gesture that was meant to look cooperative but came off as desperate. "I had a bad night," he said quickly. "I didn't know who you were. If I had known." She tilted her head slightly. "That's not an answer," she said. The manager stepped forward instinctively. "We'll handle this," he said, too fast. "He'll be terminated immediately. We'll make sure." She looked at him. He stopped. The waiter's breathing grew uneven. He laughed once, sharply, the sound cracking as soon as it left his throat. "This is insane," he said. "I didn't do anything that bad. I didn't touch you. I didn't threaten you. You enjoyed it," she said calmly. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. "You enjoyed having power over someone you thought didn't matter," she continued. "That's why this escalated. Not because you were tired. Not because you were stressed." He shook his head violently. "That's not true." She gestured gently toward the room. "Look around," she said. "Who did you perform for?" He followed her gaze despite himself. The diners avoided his eyes. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked relieved. A few looked ashamed. "You didn't disrespect me," she said. "You disrespected the room. I just happened to own it." The line settled over the space like a verdict. The manager cleared his throat. "You're done," he said to the waiter, voice shaking despite himself. "Hand over your apron." "What?" the waiter snapped, spinning toward him. "You can't." "Now," the manager said. The waiter looked back at her, panic fully breaking through now. "Please," he said. "I'll apologize. Right now. I'll say whatever you want." She nodded once. "Good," she said. "You will." He turned to the room, voice loud, rehearsed, frantic. "I'm sorry," he said. "I apologize if anyone felt uncomfortable. It wasn't my intention." She raised a hand. "No," she said. "Not like that." He froze. You don't apologize to everyone, she continued. You apologize to me, and you do it properly. His shoulders slumped. He stepped closer to the table, eyes glossy. I'm sorry, he said, quieter now. I was rude. I was disrespectful. I shouldn't have treated you that way. She studied him for a long moment. That's still not it, she said. His voice cracked. Then tell me what you want. I want you to understand, she said, that nothing you say right now changes what already happened. Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. I need this job, he said. I have bills. My brother. She lifted her hand again. I know, she said. The word landed heavy. The manager stepped forward, flanked now by 2 security staff who hadn't been there before. No uniforms, just presence. Give me the apron, the manager repeated. The waiter looked down at the fabric tied around his waist. His hands trembled as he untied it and held it out. Please, he said again, this time to her. I'll do better. Anywhere. I won't ever. You won't, she agreed. Security took him gently by the arm. Not rough, not dramatic. As they guided him toward the back, his voice rose. You're ruining my life, he cried. She didn't turn. No, she said evenly. You did that when you confused courtesy for weakness. The doors swung closed behind him. The sound was soft, final. The manager exhaled shakily. Your table is, of course, taken care of, he said. And will ensure no future. She stood. That won't be necessary, she said. She picked up her bag, glanced once around the room. Eyes dropped, spines straightened. I don't believe in forgiveness, she added quietly. But I do believe in mercy. She walked toward the exit, unhurried. Behind her, the restaurant slowly began to breathe again. Conversation resumed, subdued, altered. No one laughed, no one filmed, and no one forgot. The room didn't immediately return to normal. Couldn't. Normal had been quietly removed and taken out through the back door. Plates were cleared with more care than before. Glasses were refilled without being asked. Voices resumed, but lower now, as if the walls themselves were listening. Laughter didn't disappear. It thinned, became cautious, filtered through self-awareness. Every movement carried intention. The staff moved differently. Not faster, not slower, more precise. A server adjusted a crooked chair without being told. Another straightened a menu that had been sitting unevenly for hours. The manager stood near the center of the room, posture rigid, eyes scanning not for problems but for alignment. No one leaned, no one slouched, no one tested boundaries. The table where she had sat remained empty. No one rushed to reset it. Someone eventually folded the napkin she had left behind, careful not to crease it incorrectly, as if it still belonged to her. In the kitchen, no one spoke for a full minute. Then someone whispered, "Was that really?" and stopped. Another shook their head sharply. A third crossed themselves without thinking. Outside, the night had settled into its usual rhythm. Traffic hummed. Streetlights buzzed softly. The city exhaled. She stepped onto the sidewalk and paused, letting the door close behind her. The sound was gentle, controlled, final. A black car idled at the curb. Not flashy. No tinted arrogance. Just presence. The driver stepped out immediately, already holding the door open before she reached it. She didn't acknowledge him with words. She didn't need to. As she slipped inside, someone across the street leaned toward their companion and whispered a name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. But it traveled anyway. Passed from mouth to mouth, table to table, block to block. By morning, the story would be different depending on who told it. Some would say a waitress got fired for bad service. Some would say a woman shut down a room without raising her voice. Some would say nothing at all, but they'd tip better, speak softer, pay faster. The restaurant would stay open. The lights would come on tomorrow night. New diners would arrive believing they were safe inside their own importance. But the staff would remember. The manager would remember. The room would remember. And somewhere, a man without an apron would sit in silence, replaying every word, Every look, every moment he mistook patience for permission. The car pulled away from the curb, folding her back into the city she already owned. Power doesn't demand respect. It waits for you to expose yourself.